Welcome, everybody. I am Shashi Srikantan. I'm a managing director here at Hearst and the head of Level Up Ventures. And I'm thrilled to welcome you all to today's event, Legal Myths That Can Wreck Your Startup. A little bit about us. Level Up Ventures is an early stage sector agnostic investor focused on backing exceptional Black and Latino-led startups. We're one of 4 internal venture capital arms at Hearst, and our mission is to invest in founders who are redefining industries and innovating in spaces that traditional venture capital often overlooks. We're not just about writing checks. We provide real hands-on support to help our founders grow. One way we do that is through our Scout Network, which is a group of Hearst employees who help connect startups to the right people, to the right expertise, opportunities. Another key way we support our founders is by giving them access to expert resources like this session today. Legal strategy isn't always top of mind for founders, particularly very early stage founders, but missing key legal details can really negatively impact a company. It can seriously dilute a founder's stake, often just because you don't necessarily understand what you're signing or fully understand what you're signing. And we really want to shift that mindset from reactive to proactive so that you all can protect your businesses and your equity from day one. That's why today we've brought together some of the top legal minds in the startup space. These are firms that have worked with the top startups that you've all heard of on everything from fundraising to scaling. These attorneys have, quite frankly, seen it all. And today they're here to help you avoid the most common legal pitfalls that trip up early stage startups. This session is part of our broader webinar series at Level Up Ventures. It's designed to help founders understand the rules of the game, build world-class networks, get real actionable advice from the people in the know. So we have a great lineup of speakers today. I encourage you to take advantage of their expertise while you've got access to them. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And so with that, I'll hand it over to our Level Up venture partner, Gary Stewart, to kick things off.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Sashi, and thank you to everyone who showed up. So good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Gary Stewart. I'm a venture partner at Level Up Ventures and the founder also of an AI startup called mycofounder.ai, which is an app to help founders access the feedback and the funding that they need. So we're in private beta right now. I'm gonna do my shameless plug. So if you need either business advice or access to funding, please feel free to send me an email to gary.stewart@mycofounder.ai. And as of today, though, I'm really excited to kick off this essential discussion on legal myths that can wreck your startup. Why are we doing this event? I think Shashi's covered that pretty well. In terms of my background, I've been like a lawyer myself, an investor, professor, and a founder. And I think what I've realized is that of all of those, startups are the things that move the quickest. And I think it's really hard sometimes to fully appreciate just how quickly they move. And you always feel like you're being overwhelmed with like lots of decisions about fundraising, hiring, equity growth, a lot of times about things that you don't even fully understand. And so it might seem as if like kind of legal strategy is something you could just think about later when you raise some money. But then the truth of the matter is that sometimes waiting too long can cost you everything. And that's why we want to have this session today so that you don't make the mistake of some of the unicorns we've seen, whether it's like WeWork or Theranos or FTX that have imploded in part because of the legal and governance failures, or even companies like Uber, where the founder, Travis, was eventually kicked out of his own startup. And there could have been ways to have structured it so that that couldn't have been possible, like let's say the way that Mark Zuckerberg has been able to do. So these decisions actually kind of are fundamental to the choices that you'll be able to make later on in the life of your business as you kind of grow and scale. And even at the early stages, whether it's a single bad contract, messy cap table can stop some investors from even looking at you seriously, even if you do have traction, or the wrong fundraising structure. All these things actually matter a lot more than you as a founder think about at the beginning, because you're so busy trying to get through each and every day. So that's why we brought together these experts. And we have, as Shashi mentioned, an incredible lineup of top tier startup lawyers who worked with some of the biggest startups and some of the biggest investors. And so they've seen firsthand a lot of the mistakes that founders make over and over again, and they know exactly how to help you to avoid them. So with that, I want to kind of give a warm welcome to our panelists. I'm going to start with Joshua, since I see you first, I think. Joshua Eisenson is a partner at Goodwin, which is a major player in the tech and life sciences space, specializing in helping startups to scale and raise capital the right way. Next on, I see Devin Barnett, who's an associate at Cooley, which is one of the most well-known law firms in venture capital, representing thousands of startups and investors. Next up, I see Valerie, who's an associate at Gunderson, which is, again, one of the top names in startup law, representing high-growth companies from pre-seed all the way to IPO. And last but not least, we have Paige Bollinger, a partner at Croak Fairchild, a powerhouse firm that focuses on providing practical, business-friendly legal advice to founders as they navigate growth and fundraising. And thank you especially to Paige, because I know, as she mentioned, she just had her baby, 10 days ago? She's on maternity leave, but she's taken the time out to be with us today. So thank you for making that effort. And so with that, we're going to kind of just jump into it. Maybe I'll go in reverse order, starting with Paige, and ask you to share your 1-minute reverse pitch, if possible. If you can tell us a little bit about who you are besides being a lawyer, that would be awesome. And then a bit about your firm.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Paige Bollinger. As Gary mentioned, I'm a partner at Croak Fairchild. Who am I besides being a lawyer? Well, I'm a mom. That's a very acute part of my life right now. I'm an athlete. I run. I do, I'm a cook. I'm a normal person, but I'm also a venture enthusiast. And I sort of hate to be the person that's like, well, we're doing a venture panel, and I'm also into venture, but I am, I've always really loved the ecosystem. I participate in it outside of being a lawyer. So, angel investing, advising startups, really immersing myself in the industry because it's really exciting. I actually find it to be a super, what's the word? I find it to be motivating despite the times, some depending on, how you view the times. And working with people who really have amazing vision. I really see myself as like a problem solver, not really a lawyer that just has a skill set as a lawyer. So when I work with creative people who have a problem to solve, who see the white space, it's always really fun for me. Croak Fairchild, let me tell you about our firm. We've been around for almost 6 years. The firm was founded by partners from many large law firms that you've probably heard of, Kirkland and Ellis, Sidley Austin. And the whole point was, hey, we have all these great founders or these great clients that we want to work with in a different type of way. And they kind of spun out and they attracted a lot of, lawyers who were looking for a similar experience. Prior to joining the firm, I actually worked in-house at a fund of funds on the investor side. So I was a part of a 3-person legal team where I sort of saw everything and how investors think about making their decisions about investment, from early stage all the way through growth stage equity investments. And that was a really foundational experience for me. And I said, I really want to go back and work with founders and investors alike. So now my practice is split pretty 50-50, I'd say, between representing investors, whether it's funds or high net worth individuals or family offices, as well as founders like yourselves who are looking for investment and other types of advice. So happy to be here and looking forward to talking with everyone else.
Awesome. All right, so let's go next to Valerie.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for the introduction, Gary. So I'm Valerie Wood. I am an associate at Gunderson Detmer. In terms of who I am, so I'm from Houston, Texas. I have not lived there for quite a while, but I don't think you can take Texas out of me, which can be a good and bad thing, I think. Long story short, actually, I kind of feel like sometimes I lucked into this part of my life in the sense that I actually started my career as an opera singer. I know, fun fact. And then decided to go to law school and started at a very white shoe firm. For those on the call here with me at Cravath, that they will know it. And then decided this is boring to me and not where I want to be. What else is there that one can do as a lawyer? And someone used to tell me, "Oh, I work at Gunderson. We get to attend board meetings and we get to play a role with respect to management and helping advise and guide and consult." And I was like, "What is this?" So I just found it to be super interesting and came over to Gunderson now February 2019 and have been here since and have really loved the role that I play here, which is similar to Paige, representing evenly both companies and VCs, whether that is, taking a company that started last week, doesn't know who it wants to be on the board, doesn't know how to structure the equity, doesn't know who's going to even be the CEO, to, our later stage companies that are getting acquired for obscene amounts of money while they're on their cruise waiting for the wire to come in. It is such a kind of pleasurable, wonderful experience to be able to have that. And Gunderson has been around for about, I guess we're now at the 30th anniversary of Gunderson. And, this is what we did. We started in Silicon Valley, and this is all we focus on. Our bread and butter is representing founders, representing VCs, representing every aspect that would come into the life of a founder and the company in its early stages, all through its exit. The only thing we don't really do is litigation, which some people on this call have me covered. But with respect to that, love this space, love speaking to you all. So happy to answer any questions as they arise.
Awesome. And do you want to give a little aria or something before?
No.
Seriously, now I'm like, let me hear you sing.
Yeah, I was like,
let me get the bars.
Come on.
I had a law professor who my first year would be like, okay, so now sing. And then I'd be like, no, thank you. And then 3 months later, he'd be like, no, but really, for now sing. And I'd be like, no, thank you. And then like right before class, no, I actually meant it. It's time to sing. So I had to sing.
Well practiced.
Maybe we'll have one-on-one separately, and I might do a line or so.
Okay. All right. So next up we have Devon. How am I saying?
Davon.
Davon. Okay.
Devon is my Starbucks name. That's what I
okay.
That's they get it right when I say that. But good to be here with everyone. My name is Davon Barnett. I'm at Cooley, which again, similar to the other firms here. Cooley is very well known in the space for representing startups, high growth companies, and their investors throughout their life cycle. I'm from the Washington D.C. area, so from anyone who is from there, born and raised in the Washington D.C. area. Similar to Valerie, actually, I also did not start my career as a startup lawyer. I was at another firm doing different boring work, Valerie, as you mentioned, and sort of in my second year was like, I want to do something different. I was always into tech stuff, and I used to always think to be a tech lawyer, emerging companies lawyer, you had to sort of have some tech background, right? You had to be sort of in it, but then realize you did not have to do that. You really just have to love the space and love the work, love working with founders, and that's really what I like to do, right? And so beyond just the sort of legal representing client stuff, I speak on as many panels as I can. One of my big pro bono clients is Pharrell Williams' Black Ambition Prize Fund, where we do a lot of sort of paneling for those founders, founders of color, and founders that are underrepresented. So love sort of doing that work there. But my day to day is again representing founders and startups from throughout their life cycle. Again, love being at a place like Cooley where we sort of think of it as a company can never outgrow Cooley. Like we grow with you. So as small as you are, as big as you are, from a small startup to a company that IPOs. And we can put you in touch with sort of all the various things that you sort of need. So I love that sort of about being here. Beyond being a lawyer, though, Gary, I'm not an opera singer, so Valerie, that's super impressive. But I'm a husband, cat dad. I also am an amateur art collector, so love sort of collecting art. And then. Gary, one thing I think you mentioned one legal mistake that we should maybe.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask that next, but yeah, you can go ahead now.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was part of it, but
no, it was. It seems like you were paying attention. It is, it is part of it.
No, one thing I would say, as a general matter, when I first sort of started, one of the things that one of the partners I love what he said was, sort of don't, for the companies, don't get into legal debt. And what that means is not going to a firm and racking up a bunch of legal bills. What it means is sort of that penny wise, pound fool sort of thing. Is don't think, oh, I'm not going to hire legal counsel now or go get adequate legal counsel in this space because I can't afford it. Because you will see that if you do a lot of the things that we'll talk about wrong, later on, that legal debt is going to be so much more expensive to fix it. Whereas, all of us on here can do it very quickly, very efficiently, at a cost that will, again, later on down the line, if you have to sort of go back, clean it up, some of that, again, being that legal debt can be very detrimental to your company, but also you personally as a founder. So.
All right, awesome. So last but not least, Josh.
Hey everybody, Josh Eisenson here. Before I even jump in on my own spiel, I couldn't agree more with what Devon just said. We all, I'm sure, Valerie, Devon, and Paige, we all see this all the time where folks try to get things done quickly. They go to Uncle Joe to set up the company or to issue out some additional stock, and it's not done correctly. And to fix problems later down the road can have serious, implications, tax implications, other implications that are actual out-of-pocket costs to you, and frankly, to pay us to fix it. And it's just unfortunate, given that we can very easily, all of us can get these things done very efficiently, very quickly, and be a resource to each and one of you as you're working through, especially the initial stuff, the initial legal matters. Anyways, I digress here. Again, Josh Eisenson, I'm a partner in Goodwin's New York tech practice, where I focus on working with everyone from two founders with an idea to emerging and growth stage and pre-IPO companies, mostly venture-backed, though some that are not, as well as working with venture, private equity, and strategic investors. Bread and butter is really working with founders and with management as business advisors, as your consigliere, so to speak. We don't come in here as just legal counsel, but we're bigger picture, and we support founders through really what are instrumental, fundamental transactions to your business. And we do that by understanding from a grassroots level your business and what makes your company tick. And we're able to support you really through both legal as well as those commercial considerations and just being strategic for you. On a personal note, I'm a former founder in the ed tech space. And then when that company imploded, I went to law school and have been in the venture space now for well over a decade. I've been at Goodwin since 2018, January 2018. And my entire career, I've been working with venture companies. I genuinely have a passion for it, and happen to, I guess, have always been surrounded by it. All my friends and family and siblings are all in tech and or are founders and VCs. So it's just it's a passion. And then more on the personal front, and then I'll shut up. Father, husband, I have 2-year-old twins, another girl on the way. I am an avid skier, though broke my shoulder like 2 weeks ago out in Utah, so not skiing anymore this season. And otherwise, suburbanite now, which is crazy to say. I just moved out of New York after 15 years living there, so excited to chat through this with everyone.
No, awesome. So a bunch of really interesting people, opera singers, parents, cat parents, all that's awesome. Let me start with I was going to put it at the end, but I'm going to put it actually at the beginning. How do you afford a lawyer as a founder, right? Because it's you might not be able to afford your Slack, and it just seems that lawyers are so expensive. So what are the different mechanisms by which a founder that's really cash strapped and sees kind of some of the challenges that you talk about as being very real, but also still very hypothetical and long-term, as opposed to paying the rent or paying my employees? How would you help them to kind of think that through about how they can maybe structure a relationship with each of you or your firms such that it's actually palatable and possible? Let me start with Valerie. I'm gonna go in the middle this time, and then go to Devon, Josh, and then to Paige.
Yeah, I would say I know I didn't get a chance to kind of weigh in on that stuff. In some ways, the fees discussion is always interesting. I think depending on who you're speaking with, depending on the law firm, you may or may not encounter that depending on where you are in the stage of your growth, you may be a really great candidate for someone who would be offering a deferral, for instance. There's a lot of promise with respect to your particular company. The law firm knows you don't have the cash. They're perfectly happy to speak with you, and if it sounds like it's like, especially doing what a lot of our firms do, which is support venture-backed companies, understanding that our goal, and so I'm speaking for myself, our goal is not to bankrupt a company. Our goal is that we would have a long-term relationship, that over time, hopefully we can help you get money, get investors to get behind the company, such that from there we extract our fees, rather than necessarily thinking about it conceptually that we're trying to take your sweat equity from you in that regard. And so with all that said, I know, Gunderson, for instance, offers deferrals. I think, Gary, you may have communicated this to some of your founders. So I'd be happy to discuss that further one-on-one. But the important thing being, as Josh and Devon both spoke about, is that at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff, as they're saying, will get you later. You will save, that money today, but I guarantee you the number of companies that I encounter, particularly when I'm on the investor side, when the moment is here, the investor is ready to write you this beautiful check, and then they take a look under the hood and they see so many different disasters, they're going to be like, what is happening here and who was your counsel? You just don't, particularly, this is one of the points that I have as we're talking to really Black and Latino founders of color here. You don't want to be in a situation where it looks as though you haven't put just as much value and energy into staying organized, keeping track of your corporate records, understanding what the rules are to a certain extent. So in some ways, there is a lot of inherent value in that. So to answer your question directly, Gary, you really got to have conversations with the right lawyers, see if they will work with you from the beginning, see if they will invest in your company such that on a long-term basis, you all can have like a very winning relationship, but also you look very informed, very organized when the time comes for real money.
So, because I know that most of you might have a variation of the same answer, so I'm actually going to push it a little bit. And I'm actually going to go to Josh, because since you said you were a former founder, and then I'll come back to Devon. If you were trying to choose between law firms, like, how do you choose between law firms? Like, everyone's going to be like, oh, we're awesome, we know everybody, we're rich. Like, what is it that, like, how would you choose as a founder the law firm that you should be working with?
I think it comes down to the relationship that you build with the team that you're going to be working with at the end of the day, right? And so I personally can say that all of the founders and management teams that I work with are friends of mine, and I would happily go out for drinks with them. And that, by the way, it goes both ways, right? You want to have a good relationship with your lawyer, just like you want to have a good relationship with your investors. Your investors are your lawyer is going to be your partner for the next however long it's going to take you, right? You're in this journey to ultimately have an exit. So 5, 7, 10 years. Your investors are the same thing. It's a marriage. It's a long-term relationship that really is going to make or break, or help to make or break your business. And so I think that's probably the most important aspect. I mean, I would acknowledge that any one of us are quite skilled in legal capabilities. And so it's really having that relationship and frankly, feeling the trust and love for who you're working with in a way that they're going to be there in your hardest times, right? 99% of the companies that we represent do not just go straight up and to the right. There are going to be tough times, and that's when your lawyers, as well as your investors, need to be there for you. and need to be able to support you through that and guide you.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then Devon, I'll come back to you since you're the one that brought it up. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that, you know, founders thought that they could just defer until like year 10 that came back to really bite them in the butt?
Yeah, I mean, some of the common mistakes that again we see is you know, on the equity front, it's, you know, you get their organizational documents and you're like, wait, you actually never issue yourself equity, right? And then at a certain point, it's like you actually don't own any of the company, and you know, as anyone can tell you, that raises some issues. If this is right before a round, it's like, whoa, you know what I mean? We're talking about some you know, got to pay for them, and you can't pay for them at the par value anymore, potentially. So, you know, it's the hey, did anyone else work on this with you? Oh yeah, sure. I had two folks, someone who helped me build the code. Did you get them to sign anything? No, they're my friend, and you know, they didn't sign. I didn't need to, you know, do it. Okay, reach out and get them to sign it. Hey, they're asking for some equity now, and you know, it's those are, you know, some of the big ones that we see, and a lot of it just, you know, I think you know, Valerie may have mentioned it, but like kind of like documenting stuff, keeping yourself organized. It doesn't have to be always the most like well crafted legal, you know, document. It's just like, hey, I want to issue this person this, or you know, I'm taking, you know, minutes of, I want to issue this person this equity at, you know, this price, or just, you know, putting something down on paper that so that we have something to work with, right? Sometimes it's like we're trying to like backtrack and figure out what happened, and you know, again, that sort of like you know, raises the cost. So those are the two big things I always find, like equity and IP stuff are the really the big ones. Again, to go back to sort of, you know, two things that Valerie, both Josh mentioned, again, some of the stuff is, again, a lot of the firms we're going to offer the discounts, we're going to offer deferrals. To Josh's point, you want that relationship, right? Who can you pick up the phone and talk to and call, and they're not going to like run the clock for that sort of like call that you do, that can kind of like keep costs low. And then also, again, shameless plug for, I know a lot of us have it, but Cooley Go, we offer a lot of resources for founders, like public facing sort of free resources. Those same resources, when you know, if you're a client, to keep costs low, it's a lot of like DIY stuff, right? It's like, here's a employment agreement, advisor agreement, consultant agreement, right? Like these things, and it's a plug and play. To try to use it one time, you shouldn't have to like every single time you need to use it now, you know, to come back to your counsel and run the bill up. I'm always like, hey, this is for you to go and use when you want to hire folks in California or New York and do these things, and you plug it. If you have any questions, you feel free to come back and reach out. But it's a, you know, do it yourself type of thing. And I think you know, again, trying to offer those type of things where the founders and the company are able to take these things and then come to us with like the really big issues that, you know, we can discuss and talk about, but sort of not so much of the day-to-day, you know, you need us to do every single thing, because that will run up sort of like the legal bill.
And I'm just maybe pushing that a little bit farther. I don't know, Paige, if I'm gonna ask you to take this one, which would be, you know, like the Mark Zuckerberg issue, right? Like you have co-founders, as I think Devon mentioned, maybe they did their work, but like for some reason you guys didn't kind of think through all of the potential conflictual situations. And then when money is involved or power is involved, all of a sudden, all of the, you know, the stuff comes out that you guys didn't have the time to think about before. And then similarly with investors, you know, kind of like they say to you, here's like $1 million or $2 million or whatever. And you're like, oh my God, you just see the money, you want to get it signed. But then there are all these clauses in the contract that give them a lot of power in certain situations. And you just think, again, it's so hypothetical that you just really want the money that you're just willing to kind of forget about that. Like, can you help me think about some of those things that founders should be thinking about, both in terms of their co-founders, but then also in terms of their investors to protect themselves?
It's amazing that you actually asked me this, because I wrote this down. So maybe we're having like a moment. I was like, let me talk about co-founders, because in the last year in particular, maybe just to how the market is, and I'm sure you know, the other panelists have encountered this. I've dealt with a lot of founder breakups and a lot of, or founder divorces, breakups, however you want to describe it. And it was something I wanted to talk about today, in particular, because I think who you marry, so to speak, when you start your venture is really important. You know, if you are a founder of a company and you're looking for a co-founder, how you bring that person on, you know, how much equity you give them, What, is their role? What is their formal, are they president of the company? Are they secretary? Are they treasurer? Do they have like a formal legal role within your, on your company? Do they have a board seat? Like, how are you thinking about that relationship? If you're starting out, you and another person or you and two other people, what does that look like? It's similar to, when you hear these like Hollywood, divorce lawyers talk about like prenups and how important they are. I always say in the beginning when I get, two founders who are like really gung-ho about their thing and they're like, we're going to put this together and I just need my formation documents. This is my best friend's best friend and it's going to be great. I'm like, let's talk about the bad things that could happen. Let's structure, your equity agreement so that there's vesting, so that there are termination provisions, so that there's buyback provisions that sort of favor, the person that's not leaving. And I think having those conversations early can save you. I have been involved in scenarios where a company really needs to get capitalized, needs funding, but they actually cannot move forward because they need that co-founder to sign off on, to give consent for that transaction, or that co-founder is just holding up the situation, and it actually generates more bills, right? Because we have to think creatively about how can we dilute this person? How can we get around this person who is causing, issue? And it can also, it can alienate some investors. Certain investors will be forgiving about this, but others will say, I'm not writing you a check until you figure out the situation, until you get this person off your cap table. And that might mean you got to pay them out of, from whatever proceeds you get. You might have to dilute them down. You might have to, convince them to take a lower equity. I mean, you might have to structure around them and find a legally compliant way to do it and legally enforceable way to do it. That's really important to get right from the beginning. I can give you an example from when right before I, went on maternity leave, was working with a client that had an equity agreement that they put together themselves that, for a business that's spinning off a ton of cash. But the agreement was for a company that didn't actually exist yet, because this founder was like, I'm going to create this thing on my own and I'm going to send this out and it's going to be fine. And so I said, well, what entity is this for and what equity does this person expect to get? And it's generated bills, because we got to go back and do kind of a fishing expedition to understand, how to right the ship and to get everybody at the place where they want to be. The other thing I would say too is around conflicts. So if you and a co-founder are not working out and you got to, divorce, remember that your law firm represents the company. So, in the beginning, everybody is on the same team, right? So your law firm might give you some advice as an individual that pertains to your role as a CEO or founder or whatever. But as soon as there's like a disconnect, some of that conflict gets a little strange, and you have to remember that if you're leaving a company, that firm doesn't represent you. If you are a founder who's staying, it might be in your best interest to think about having another, lawyer look at how that separation is going. And so you want to make sure that before you get to that point, you've got tight documents, that you've got a really good plan in place, so that you're not running up a ton of bills when and if this happens. So that's the big thing that I would say, that I've seen in the last year because of how the market is sort of working out. And if you can kind of solve for those future problems that hopefully never come up early, and make the investment early, you're going to be in a really good position.
Awesome. And so maybe, Josh, I'll ask you the other part of that question, which was about the investors. Because I guess there was a moment where investors were really kind of mean. I'm putting this very simplistically. Then they were like super friendly because they had to like get the deals. Then where are they now? Are they mean again? And how does that kind of like get reflected in the contracts and the clauses that they have in order to kind of maintain control of the company?
I don't know. Are they mean or nice? It's case by case at this point with the companies that at least I'm working with. It's an interesting question, because back in 20 and 21, when everyone was able to basically get whatever valuation they wanted, and founders got huge valuations that didn't necessarily align with the revenue that they were generating or the stage of the business that they were at. And I see some nods around the table here, so to speak, because we all saw this. And then in 22 and 2023, as folks were running out of cash or their runway was sort of dwindling, they were shocked when they weren't able to even raise on flat rounds a lot of the time. And, you know, with a high valuation comes some real growth expectations, and a lot of companies unfortunately didn't achieve what they set out to achieve. What, you know, the companies that have turned it around, or what we've seen a lot of, is folks have gone back to the drawing board and have really tightened up on their own spend and really made sure that their budgets are super efficient. And that, by the way, is true for their spend on lawyers as well. Sorry if there's some yelling in the background. My girl is having a hissy fit right now. But you know, that tightening of the budget, what it's really done is it's made founders and made management teams, executives, really focus in on the important spends and be efficient about how you spend capital. I wouldn't say that investors have gotten nicer or meaner or anything. I think it's more that you have, you know, investors want to make investments, right? Like that is how that's ultimately, they're in the business of making money, and they do that by making investments. They are also in the business of returning capital to their LPs, and that only happens, again, when they reach an exit, whether that's IPO or M&A. So, you know, it's a hard balancing act. I'd say right now, if you have the word AI in the title of your company, you're probably able to raise capital. Though again, like I think that's sort of changed a bit from the fads in the past, where folks are actually looking at the fundamental business and understanding that it is a good business or it is not. But you know, at the end of the day, yes, I think to your question, investors are excited to invest and see a lot of opportunity. I'll say that as interest rates were a little bit lower, you know, a year ago, there was a little bit more activity than maybe there was 6 months ago as the elections were coming up. And now post-election, we're seeing, I mean, I'm sure the other folks around the table would agree with this, like it has gotten busy again, which is awesome. It means that investors want to invest again. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I think part of the question really though is like, as a founder, I want to have as much leverage as possible. I want to be Mark Zuckerberg and have 15% of my company and still control it like 20 years later. And so how do I kind of make sure that when I'm structuring it at the beginning, in the same way that I have to have a prenup with my co-founders, I want to have a prenup with my investors too, and remind them that it's my company, even if I'm letting them come along for the ride.
Yeah, I mean, look, that comes back to, I say this to every founder I work with, it's focus in. The most important thing that you can focus in on is control of the board. When you have control of the board, you control the company. You can't get, I mean, technically, you can't get fired as the CEO unless you can get outvoted on the board. And so when you're going into the negotiations, I mean, I know a lot of folks look at the valuation right away. I look at the board composition. How are they thinking about the control and voting of the company from, you know, those fundamentals? And then from there, yeah, you look at the valuation, and I think we can talk a little bit about, you know, don't overstate your valuation per se. Like, don't, you know, if your fundamentals, if your economics look right for a great valuation, you're going to get it. And if, you know, I totally respect the desire to have a huge valuation. It's exciting. It's great for marketing, right? But taking that big valuation also puts a lot of pressure on the ability to raise in the future. And then, and so, you know, I think it's really important to think about what kind of growth you're going to get with the runway that you're getting 12, 18, 24 months out. And then the other thing to focus in on are the controls that the investor is putting in place. So I think I break things down into economic and operational controls. And I think it's perfectly reasonable for an investor to come in and want some economic controls, but operational controls, a lot of the time we try to avoid them because, well, you know, you don't want them controlling how you operate your business. And that gives you a good sense of what kind of partner they're going to be in that marriage as well.
Gary, if I may, just really
Of
quickly,
course.
this is also a plug for hiring a firm that does this work, because we also have a sense of what's market and not market. So for founders, you're getting term sheets. Like we can immediately say, right, like, oh wait, they're looking for 2 board seats. That's not, at this stage, not market. They're just different things like that we can easily spot, and can help you as a founder, as a company. Whereas someone who doesn't do this work on a regular basis, to Josh's point, they may just go, oh wait, they're writing this check for this valuation, all good, and then that's it. So you wanted that, that's sort of another plug for hiring the right counsel for this. But
well, I'm going to ask a variation of the question I asked to Josh, to all of you, actually. So let's go with Devon, and then we'll go to Valerie and Paige, which is like, what are you seeing that like maybe founders, because we're so busy in the operations, we're not seeing like macro trends or other things like that? What are the macro sort of things that you're seeing that like founders should take into account? We'll start with Devon, then go to Valerie, and end with Paige with this question.
yeah, I'll just be quick. I would say definitely board structure is very important. There are also sort of going to operational things, right? A lot of us are seeing now, there's this provision, it used to be in the investor rights agreement, matters requiring preferred director approval. That's now in the charter. That list has gotten a bit longer, and it's sort of like coming into documents a lot earlier, where it used to be later, a little bit later stage, where again, it's, you needing approval for things like, debt and, just a lot of operational hiring or firing, terminating, and the comp of sort of the CEO, those type of things. I've been seeing them come into Series C stage documents a lot more. So it's sort of like those operational things that where, you would want to sort of say, hey, right, like let's push that a little bit further. I'm down the line. So, those things.
All right, Valerie?
Yeah, I would say, especially, and I know I keep alluding to this, but particularly, I tend to be sensitive when I'm speaking with Black and Latino founders, because sometimes I think the wonderful point Devon made about knowing what market is. Sometimes we don't know what market is, right? Just generally speaking, and I think knowledge is really powerful when you're able to have an attorney that can work with you as a peer and as a partner, and make sure you're being as bold as the moment is that you're in. Sometimes I think it's easy to be a little bit afraid that if you ask for what it is that you want, that you'll scare off investors, or you'll put off investors, or the investor will walk away. And in my experience, I would definitely say that good things favor the bold. So with that said, a lot of my clients, particularly my clients of color, we push for it. The worst that can happen is the investor says no. It's really not, you were there in the first place when you didn't have it. So there's no downside to just asking for it. And so some of the things that even Devon just spoke about with respect to, limited protective provisions in terms of not limiting your ability to continue making decisions with respect to the company. Being bold with respect to, depending on where you are with the financing raise, maybe it's time for a founder top up. What's that look like? How can I make sure that I'm not going to be as further diluted as each subsequent transaction goes on, and making sure that you're contractually accounting for that in the term sheet, that, hey, at this point, I'm going to get a top up of X with this type of vesting and this type of acceleration. And you do it at the term sheet stage where your leverage is the highest, right? So it's things like that really knowledgeable counsel will be able to be like, now is the time. Another example, in recent months, I had a founder who was like, I want to maintain my high voting, and I want to do this round. I want to hold on to high voting. Now, I will be honest, most of the time in the financing, the investors go, no, sir, no, ma'am. But this time with a humongous investor, they were like, okay. So I'm just saying that you just never know how investors will take those things on. You really should have counsel that can tell you, hey, here's what we can do here. We want to make sure that common holders are required for the drag, which should be the case, but sometimes it is not. We want to make sure that you maintain control of the board for this long. We want to make sure that you're not as limited operationally as was touched upon. So again, I would definitely say that with respect to whether investors are nice again, I would say our founders asking for what they want, and just put it on the table and have counsel that can give you the courage and give you the information to know what to do.
If I may just add something to that real quick, I think it's really important to remember that, we as lawyers see so many deals, and, it may be 10, 15, 20 deals at any given time that we're doing in the venture space, right? And for a lot of founders and even the most seasoned executives, they've only done 3, 4, 5 financings. And so we are a sounding board, we are a resource, and being able to reach out to your lawyer and again, like just texting with them, right? Like that is a big deal for that relationship and for being able to get the support that you need as you're negotiating and being able to ask for things that you might feel like, wow, I don't know if I can get that. I completely agree with everything Valerie just said.
All right, Paige.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Devon and Valerie said. I would say something specific I've seen in the last few deals toward the end of last year was, I think this is because of the rate environment and sort of founders thinking creatively about how to how to fund certain things and taking on more debt, whether it's with a credit facility or a small business loan or something like that. I've seen a lot of my investors just wanting more approval over and more oversight over those decisions. Because of the rate environment, they don't want folks just going out and saying, okay, I'm going to, after this round and we've got this cash in the door, I'm going to go take on this debt facility or take on this SBA loan or whatever. They want to be involved in that process. And I would connect it to one more thing for you all who are the founders on the line is, thinking about, to the extent that you can do your homework on the investor themselves is really important, because it'll help you to understand why they are making those asks as well. And to Valerie's point, it'll help you to counter them, right? So a lot of times, investors, particularly funds, they're beholden to their LPs. And so they have to go back to the limited partners and sort of like justify some of the decisions that they're making. And I remember when I was in house in 2020 and 2021, we were flush with cash, and there was we were trying to get on as many deals as possible because it was crazy. Valuations were crazy, and there was a lot of competition to get into a certain deal. Now, I think there's a little bit of, when I talk to my investor clients, there's a little bit more of some consideration being paid toward why they're making these decisions, and getting back to their LPs. They're writing LP letters every quarter, maybe more frequently than that describes, hey, here's the deal that we just recently did. This is why we made this investment. Here's why we think this is a good idea. This is why we think it's going to return capital to you. And if you can, as a founder, try to understand where they're coming from, even if you say no, even if you're actually, I want to maintain my control, I want to maintain, my ownership percentage. Here's why I believe that works. Here's why it's actually aligned with your bottom line, with your investment thesis. If you can speak that language and align yourself, you're going to put yourself in a really good position, because they want to be able to take that and articulate that to the folks that they have to, they have to answer to. So, I would just, echo all of those things. I'd still say, ask the questions, why? Don't just accept something just because it's, a huge check across your desk. And you're like, I need this money so that I can put this MVP together. I need this money to go to the next growth step. It's always important to ask questions and be curious about it. And I think particularly, with Black and brown founders, or, founders of color, oftentimes we don't do that. And I think it's important, one, to have a lawyer who asks those questions for you or raise that for you. But, make sure that you understand. If you don't get it, if you don't understand, and there's a lot of resources online for you to prompt those questions, there's a lot of free information. If you don't get it, tell your lawyer. They're supposed to sit there and help you understand that. And if they don't help you understand the decision, then they're probably not doing their job.
So we have 10 more minutes. I'm looking if there are any questions in the chat. I don't see any, but I'm just going to remind people, if you do have a question, please ask it. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. And I guess my last kind of real question is going to be, so where does AI fit into all of this? Because these days, it just looks like I can just go to ChatGPT and be like, this is what's going on. It's here's a contract, Gary. I'm like, okay, that's good. Thanks, Chat. So how do you guys think AI is going to change the dynamic where maybe founders now think a lot of the early things they can just kind of get through AI? And then the other side of the question is, And how should founders be working with lawyers? Because I've seen like some of my founders, like when I was at Techstars, and all of a sudden it's like they watch Succession and they think it's like a combative relationship or a service relationship or something like that. And I've seen some of the lawyers be like, listen, you ain't even paying me, so why am I even talking to you? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, what is the best practice in terms of like how founders should really expect to engage with their lawyers, and what role is AI going to play in all of this? I'm going to start with Davon this time, then go to Valerie, Josh, and no, Paige, you were last time, so Paige, then Josh.
Yeah, I have a funny AI story. I had a company who sent me a document, and they were like, "Hey, Devon, can you review this document we're using for X, Y, and Z?" And I was like, "Where did you get this document from?" And they were like, "Yeah, I just popped it into Chat GPT, and they like spit out this document." And I was like, no, like it was. And again, it wasn't even like I was trying to be, before I asked, I was like, this is just, it was just weird. And again, going back to like the legal cost thing, I was just like, I mean, we can review this and provide comments and whatever, or we can just like get rid of it and I'll give you a form that we can easily like, manipulate and, so stuff like that. So that like, AI as far as like the, trying to do it yourself from that, we try to just say, listen, stay away from that as much as possible. There are definitely like resources that are coming out there to help. I mean, so far, a lot of my clients haven't really done it. Again, we have so many like forms and resources and just things to connect founders with that sort of like AI on the legal front, haven't really been, I feel like I don't, use the word threatened by it or anything like that. It definitely, I do believe it'll be a good resource for everyone to have, both lawyers, non-lawyers, and things like that. But again, haven't seen it too much sort of like come in and interrupt the practice or do any of that type of stuff. And then the second part of your question, Gary, how to work with lawyers. I mean, it goes back to the points we're making. It's really like I tell founders from very on, like, hey, this is the way that I operate. I'm going to give you a toolkit of things that you should be able to use to like help you go off and like do the things that you have to do early on. If depending on what type of company you have, right? Like when you want to come, we usually have also like these whiteboard sessions where we'll have them meet with like one of our tech transactions groups, sort of IP folks, and we'll say, tell us everything you're doing, you're working on, you're operating with, and they can get it all free, right? A free sort of whiteboard session with our attorneys, and then they'll have a better access. Okay, I understand the product, I understand what you need, and then so when they need to like build like their MSA or things like that, they have a good foundation for doing it and building that form very efficiently, very quickly, for them to keep costs low. And again, it's like sort of like come to me when you have the questions. We'll hop on a call, we'll figure it out, and then try to be very upfront with like, okay, if you're trying to do these things, this is the cost that will be associated with it. If you're getting a document from someone that you want us to review, I can take a light approach and review it, or we can like really go and dig in, up to you. And then also just understanding like weighing the risk of everything, right? Just to sort of, again, guide you between sort of that we can take a heavy hammer to a lot of things or be delicate, all with, again, trying to stay cost efficient with those things. But I tell any of the companies that I work with, feel free to pick up the phone, talk to me, and cost, things like that. If it doesn't take more than like 30 minutes, then I'm like, I'm not, I usually don't like run the clock or bill for it. But if it's like, all right, now we're starting to get into some deeper conversations, work that has to come out with it. So that's my spiel of it.
All right, awesome. Valerie?
Yeah, I know we don't have that much time, so I think I'd love to focus on the second part. I love what Josh said earlier when he said he thinks of himself kind of like a consigliere. I want to say it like it actually would say it because, again, the offer thing. But I love what he said about that, because really the reason why I'm here in this space is because, and when I came from the space that I found, like I said, quite boring, is because I'm not here to just check the box with respect to paperwork and make sure that you have the document you need for your needs. Instead, I feel like I'm more so like a confidant. I am going to tell you, hey, in layman's terms, this is what this means. This is what they're trying to do. This is how this impacts you today. This is how it impacts you in 5 years and in 10 years. This is why you should care about it now. This is why you shouldn't care about it now. This is what you should go and tell that investor. No, say it like this, say it in this order. Do you understand, number one, what you're telling the investor? Do you understand why you're telling the investor that in that order? And then they will likely say to you, why? And then you will respond, Z, right? So our job is to not only empower you with information and tools, but it's also to kind of be that, hopefully, that backbone that it encourages you to go in there and do the things that if we're telling you, no, you're not crazy, this is market, go and say X, Y, and Z. It's a really fulfilling thing to work together as partners amongst founders in that regard. And the whole reason that energizes me every day for this practice and makes it as exciting as it is. My founders and I are on the text. Like, I think of it kind of like this weird crossover between my life. It probably shouldn't be, but here's the reality of what we all do. But that's what makes it exciting and fulfilling, is that I feel like I'm a big supporter and cheerleader and advocate and counselor, and that's kind of how it kind of looks like in practice.
Awesome. So then Paige and then Josh, and then we have one question from Santosh that we're gonna allow him to ask about patents, and then we'll wrap it up. So maybe Paige.
We actually have a few questions.
I'll take this. I'll be quick. I think with AI, I'm not scared of AI. I think it actually will help improve, efficiencies in our practice. But to Devon's point, when I do get a founder who uses ChatGPT to generate a document or like a cap table and doesn't, or like some kind of metrics, I always say to them, I'm going to have to go check this and it's going to like be more expensive later. So unless like we need to talk about what tools you're going to use so that we can all be on the same page, that this doesn't cost you, X. I had one founder who said, oh, can we draft this in a way, because I know the person who's going to get this document is going to put it in an LLM model and read it. So I want it to read a certain way. And I was like, well, we could, but we should do it in this other way. So I'm not afraid of it. I think that if you as a founder are, want to use it, I think it's just a conversation you have with your lawyers and help and make sure that you integrate it in a way that is beneficial to everyone. I would say, in terms of my style of working with founders, I'm similar. Even in my investors, text me, call me, like I'm here on the ride with you. I like I said, I like to see myself as a problem solver, but part of your toolbox. I'm not employed by you, but we're partners in this together. I love being able to go and see, a lot of my CPG clients, for example, I love seeing their products out there, being able to promote them, even buying them. I have a client who has, a food product that I get to see in the grocery store. And I love seeing that often a lot. And so I think, we want to be there with you because you're building and we're helping you build. And so, I'm not afraid of getting that text late night when you're saying, oh my gosh, this thing happened, I need you to help me, because I think, the way that I view it is we're building together. So, and that's the kind of lawyer you want. And it seems like everyone on this call is similar.
Okay. Josh, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I agree with everything that has been said here. I think the biggest AI is an incredibly useful tool in a lot of respects, and in the legal world, it is in the process of developing into a tool that will be used on a consistent basis. It's getting there, but it's not there yet. And I agree with everything that has been said, in that we spend more time rewriting an agreement to actually make it work when it's pulled from ChatGPT or from Pilot or whoever it is, than just pulling something off the shelf. This is what we do day in and day out, is working with companies at early and late stages. And for the most part, we have templates that work really, really well and only need a little bit of customization. So it's not that heavy a lift, and we're going to spend more time trying to make sure that some agreement that was pulled off the internet or put together through an AI model actually works correctly. So that's my plug on that front.
No, awesome. Well, I know we're a little bit over time, but we're going to give Santosh a little bit of time to ask the question. But I see that he actually has about 3 or 4. So we're going to say, ask maybe, sorry?
Yeah, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and just read these so we can get through them
Okay,
because we do
perfect.
have 8 questions. So the first one from Santosh, he wanted to know for local and international patent searches, given that they're expensive, what are your thoughts on pushing for a patent search, even if regionally, before finalizing valuation, equity, et cetera?
Is there anyone here who's
I think I got the answer to that question. Thank you. You just spoke about, if it's AI and ML and CPG, that's totally what I was looking for. So thank you so much for that. That was helpful.
Great, thank you, Santosh. The next question is, how do the 4 law firms represented here differ? But basically, what should we ask as founders? What should they be asking you guys as they're evaluating who they want to work with?
Yeah, I can answer that. I think you should interview your lawyers, right? Like whether they're, my firm, which is a newer firm, or Cooley, Gunderson, or Goodwin, whoever you're working with, I think it's really important to ask them. Not, you'll see the website, right? You see your webpage, you see the matters they've been on, but ask them, there's only so many specifics you can give, but ask them about sort of, issues they've encountered. Sort of try to glean the level of expertise, the depth of expertise that you're getting. And also ask who's going to be working on your matters, right? Because we all have a lot of people at our law firms that we might, outsource, we might have a tax person we're working with. We might have junior associates that we're working with. We have paralegals. I think the more questions that you ask, it's totally fine. I actually find that my relationships with my founders that ask a lot of those questions up front are always great because I know exactly what's important to them. And later, I would also say, making sure that you feel that you understand like how the billing works, that you can get those bills whatever, if you say, hey, I need to see what we racked up so far, that conversation is fluid and transparent. Those are important things as well. But yeah, I think interview your founders. If you need a reference, right? If you're like, hey, this is great, but I would love to talk to somebody you've worked with, ask for it. I think that many of us would love to, to the extent that we can, connect you with people that we've worked with because we're proud of the work that we're doing with them. So never be afraid to ask those things.
I know you guys probably have to run, so I'm gonna, Shashi, maybe we just have the last 2 questions were, if you have a SaaS product, what's the view on whether investors look favorably upon a company who's already built their MVP, or would they rather be involved earlier in the process? And the last question was, can we bring the lawyers in the room as we're negotiating? So I don't know if anyone has a point of view about either of those 2 questions. The first is, how early should investors, I didn't get the first question, to be honest. And the second one is, can the lawyers be in the room as you're negotiating? The answer is yes. Maybe they're the ones doing the negotiating.
We are the ones that negotiate.
Yeah.
So I guess,
yeah, for that first question, I think that what they're probably asking is, they probably also misunderstand like the role of an investor as far as like helping build sort of like the product and the company, where investors, I don't think they really, for most of them, don't get that involved. So if you have an MVP, you don't have an MVP, I mean, they're really investing in, first and foremost, you as a founder, right? Like the you as the founder, your team, the company. And so if you're like sort of, again, I think Josh mentioned it before, they invest even at idea stage sometimes, right? Like, I love the idea, I love what you have, and they'll invest there, versus some of them are like, okay, show me a little bit more. You have an MVP, does it work, proof of concept, things like that. So I think it depends, but the answer to that is like, not really.
All right, and so the last question for me then, and thanks for giving us this extra like 5 or 6 minutes. Luckily, we're not being billed. Would be if you had one bit of advice, final advice for the founders, what would that be? And then secondly, and if they really love you and want to be in touch with you, get in touch with you, like what's the best way to do that? So we'll start with Josh, I guess, and then we'll just go down Devon, Valerie, and we'll give Paige the last word.
So I think we're all probably Googleable. That's but email, phone, either one works. Always happy to have a conversation. And, frankly, like I think it was Paige that said it a few minutes ago. It's an interview, and it goes both ways, right? You want to partner with someone that you are going to enjoy working with, and that you're going to want that you respect their advice. And frankly, we want to partner with founders that are fun to work with and are going to be successful and that are on a path to building something great. And so, it's really about having, not just a 15 or 20-minute conversation, but sitting down and really getting to know the person that you're going to be working with on the legal front.
All right, awesome.
Yep. Yeah, same thing. dbarnett@cooley.com. You can email me there, or again, if you look me up again on the website or LinkedIn, connect with me via LinkedIn as well. Same thing. One bit of advice again is try to hire counsel in this space that does this work. Can't overstate that enough. Really, important, again, the interview. And then to be honest, to Josh and to Paige's point, when companies come and they're looking, when I was a junior associate, any company that came my way, I was like, yes, let's bring them on. But then you start to realize, right, like we do a little bit of like interviewing, and don't be offended if, I'll be honest when I tell companies, right, like you may not be like a great fit for like hiring us right now. And a lot of it has to do with, again, if it's like cost wise, if it's just like, you don't have any sort of investor circling and things like that. And so it may be a big bit of a horizon. So it'd be no point of sort of like, again, having that sort of legal cost. That's a little bit of a conversation I sort of stay honest about. But then again, that doesn't always mean we have folks, for lack of a better term, spin the block all the time, right? Where they will go and hire another counsel or do things. And then as they grow and, maybe they outgrow a certain firm, they come back and it's like, hey, I'm here now, and can we help out? Have those type of things happen as well.
All right, awesome. Valerie?
Yeah, similarly, my email is bwood@gunder.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Looking forward to connecting with you all and just generally getting to know you. I would say, I think you kind of were talking about like a tip, like maybe my tip will more so be geared towards the one of the biggest mistakes I see founders and companies make from time to time, and that is not getting out your intended equity before an equity round, right? Like what that all means is that, let's say you have a feeling that you're going to get a term sheet in the next month, or you've been talking with investors, it's going real well. Like your first thought there should be like, okay, what promised equity do I have lingering, either because I promised something to an advisor or an employee via agreement, or sometimes I've seen it where it's the founder themselves, they haven't dealt with their equity. And what you want to do is you want to get it out way clear before there's any notion of a term sheet, luckily, hopefully, on the horizon. But the point being is that you're trying to capture today's fair market value. If you wait until after the price round, after that, whatever, if it's a safe financing sometimes, et cetera, it could alter the fair market value, and you would be receiving your options, or your advisors would, or your employees would, at a higher fair market value. They're not happy, you're not happy, you're annoyed at yourself. So just kind of think about that going forward. That's probably my tip, but otherwise looking forward to speaking to people.
Right, and last but not least, Paige.
Thanks again, everybody, for having me. You can find me at pbollinger@croakfairchild.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Really excited to talk further. I'd say my biggest tip takeaway, or one that's top of mind, let's see. There's a couple. I would say, okay, for those of you who are, gonna go to the Y Combinator website and get a safe and do it yourself to raise capital, that's one of the purposes of a safe. And we didn't get into this too deeply, but make sure that you are just keeping track of how many safes you're issuing and at what valuation or what discount. And one of the things that I see a lot is, we'll get a client who says, okay, I'm about to raise real capital in my seed financing or my Series A. Usually it's the seed financing. And I have all these safes outstanding. I never put a cap table together. I didn't put them in Carta or Pulley, and I now have to do it, right? And so we go through everything. We're like, is this all that there is? Oh, and there's a convertible note outstanding. Oh, and then you agreed to a warrant as well. And then things start to pile up. So I would say, if you're gonna be a little self-sufficient and do some of these things yourself, just have a log. There's a lot of resources out there on how to build a cap table. I would say you really should use a lawyer who knows how to do a cap table. do a cap table, but there are great resources to rely on instead. You know, whether it's Carter or Pulley or some other cap table management platform, but just make sure that you have a good understanding of what is outstanding, because I've had so many founders say, oh, I thought I had more equity than I really did after these things convert. And then it raises a whole bunch of issues. So just, you know, the main takeaway is just stay tight on your docs and on what you're doing, and find a really good lawyer who's going to be along for the ride.
All right, I think, well, Paige, you had the final word. Thanks again for taking time out after just having a kid a week and a half ago to be here.
Paige, amazing. I meant to say that. Amazing, absolutely amazing.
Or crazy, I don't know. Maybe sleep deprivation is powering me through.
But I think it's been an amazing session. So thank you all for taking the time out. And we know you're all really busy. I think the key takeaway for me is that you're just like normal people that are really passionate about supporting founders, and that founders, if they are at all interested, should just reach out to each or to all of you and to see if it's the right partner and build a relationship. And you guys are there, ride or dies for them if they do choose you. And it probably makes a lot more sense to talk to you at the beginning rather than to kind of make it be a very expensive mistake that might actually be a terminal mistake if they you know, don't kind of seek out legal support at the beginning. So that's it for me. Thank you everyone for staying over an extra like 14 minutes. Most of the people stayed, so I guess it really was an interesting conversation. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone.